Welcome to the debrief, everyone. Former movie producer Harvey Weinstein says he's the victim even as he braces for a criminal trial on accusations of sex crimes. Weinstein told the New York Post that his work is being forgotten because of the charges. He went on to argue that it was he who pioneered advancing women as directors and as subjects in movies. Weinstein spoke to the Post from a hospital bed after spinal surgery to clear up problems from an August 17th car accident. Weinstein did not in that interview address his January criminal case or the reported $25 million civil settlement with his accusers. Attorney Gloria Allred, however, did shed light on her involvement with that case in a recent interview with Law&Crime for an upcoming hour-long look at the matter.
I represent one of the two victims in the criminal case for whom charges have been filed. And it's the prosecution alleging that they are the victims. I also represent Annabella Shora, who is an actress who will be a witness on the issue of whether there was sexually predatory conduct by Mr. Weinstein. Some witnesses may be testifying about events that took place years ago or that they remember from years ago. They'll just have to do their best, and they know what their truth is. And if they stick to what they remember and are honest about what they don't remember, I think it'll be fine.
Speculation abounds about the possible sentence this Wednesday of rap artist Tekashi 6ix9ine. The government's sentencing recommendation says the rapper is eligible for a 37-year sentence, but prosecutors note that he eventually did renounce gang affiliations. The rapper himself sent a letter to the judge who will sentence him, saying he wants to use his position as an artist and role model to help others, but he also said he feared gang retaliation. Tekashi 6ix9ine pleaded guilty to federal gang charges and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Some observers think he could be released this week. Actress Lori Loughlin, and her fashion designer husband are accusing the government of failing to turn over evidence in an alleged college admissions scandal. The couple is accused of bribing what the defense calls a rogue administrator at USC in order to get their daughters into college. Defense attorneys say the couple thought the money they were spending was going to USC itself for, quote, legitimate university-approved purposes or to other legitimate charitable causes. In order to win, prosecutors must prove the defendants intended to defraud the college in a conspiracy with others. The defense wants FBI reports and other documents which show precisely what accused ringleader Rick Singer said to his clients and to the colleges with which he dealt. Four guests are with us tonight. Let's begin now with attorneys Adam Konda and Julie Rendelman here with me in New York. So, Julie, the defense basically wants all these things Rick Singer said, including statements to other clients, saying the money was going to be directed to a USC program. Is that enough to really get this defendant off the hook?
I don't know that it's enough to get her off the hook. The question is she entitled to it? And so I think that if there's any evidence that supports her position that she did not know, that her intent was not what is, laid out in the charges, then I think that she has a right to it, and I certainly will go a long way towards her defense.
Adam, it's sort of an interesting situation here because, we hear this in case after case where a defendant says, oh, this is so-called Brady material. I have a right to it. It's going to get me off the hook. Here, she's asking for all of these communications that my understanding is don't directly involve her. So how is that necessarily relevant to her case? And that's what the government's saying back.
Well, because if he has told other clients, other people involved in this scheme, that their money was specifically going to legitimate fundraisers, legitimate charitable places, and that was their actual belief, then I think that's going to go a long way for them to prove that, hey, we just thought that the money was going somewhere totally legitimate.
Okay, but we see this in case after case where, let's say there's, and I'm just using this hypothetically as an example, Julie, there's a business and there's a shady side and there's a clean side, and on the clean side, if investigators were to look at books, everything might look okay, but then there were other alleged things that may not be up to snuff. You see that in cases from time to time, so why are the other communications relevant here?
Well, for a couple things.
They may be okay.
Well, a couple things. They may be okay, but the question is, are they? So keep in mind, Rick Singer could have had a conversation with other potential parents that either incorporated something that was happening with Lori Loughlin, incorporated what he had said to them, or made some reference to what was happening to them. We don't know, obviously, because we haven't seen it. And the defense's position is those exist, and those would, in fact, help her. And if they would, then why wouldn't they be turning them over?
Yeah, so let us see here. Let's switch to our other other guests right now. We've got Dina in California, Michael Bryant in our newsroom right now. So, Michael, one of the things the defense said here, quote, it's common knowledge that universities, as part of their legitimate admissions process, regularly solicit donations from the families of prospective students, and that such donations can have a material effect on admissions. And even the court said, according to the defense, I don't think you have much of an uphill battle convincing a jury that if you give donations to a school, it's going to improve your chances of getting in. So if there's a legal way to do this, is that Lori Loughlin's defense now that I thought I was doing the legal way and my people messed it up?
Well, you know, as they say, the best defense is a good offense. So I think by claiming that we're not getting everything we need from the prosecution, we keep talking about the word exculpation. There's some exculpating information. We don't know what it is, but we're out there talking about it as if it's evidence that exists that might justify the actions of mommy and daddy. And I think that's a tough haul.
Dina, the university basically already said in this case, oh, we don't admit people based on donations. And the court has already said this sounds like hogwash. We're not giving it much credit here. So does this boil down to the money just allegedly went the wrong way to the same end? Or are we looking at this the wrong way? Because bribery requires bribing a person and not giving it to the university.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. It definitely is helping them with public opinion too, I'm sure. But it's a time-honored tradition of parents donating to a school to help their child get in. The fact that USC said that doesn't happen is kind of laughable. It's also interesting because he has a foundation, and so it's possible that he was telling his clients that he gives money multiple times over the years and has a relationship with the university, which would mean a donation through his foundation would have more impact than a single time donation to the university.
So much more to dig into on this case. We'll be back with the panel later on as we move into our next case. Now, we're going to break down some of the critical testimony from an Arizona state trooper and closing arguments in the case of that trooper shot in the face, the trooper surviving to take the witness stand. Ramon Bueno is the defendant here. Trooper James Casey, the victim. Casey pulled over a vehicle for having dark tinted windows, and authorities say Bueno, one of the backseat occupants, started shooting. Casey testified that his interactions with the other people in that car were odd, and he asked everyone for ID to check and see if they had active warrants. He said the man who prosecutors think was Ramon Bueno, the defendant, gave him a fake name, so he asked the man for a social security number. Trooper Casey explains what happened from there.
When he said 6, I started to lean in because it sounded like he was giving me something, and he said 0, and I heard 0, and the next thing I heard was an explosion. And as I've said, I always thought it spun me completely around, but it spun me. The last thing I remember is I saw Trooper Alfano, and he had a look of terror on his face, and I don't remember anything after that. I just went down. Ray, or Trooper Cruz, Ray, I saw him. I remember him straddling me, and I remember I was looking up at him, and he kept saying, Casey, Casey. He's like, you okay, you okay? And I remember he told me that I had been shot. And I was making a mental note not to touch my face because I was afraid if I put my hands in my face, I'd feel a gaping hole and I would go into shock and die. You know, he was like just shaking me and telling me, you know, don't let that scumbag kill you. You know, hang in, hang in. I remember when I leaned over and I was hanging over and I was just letting the blood run out of my mouth. I mean, it really started dawning on me that I'm dying. I just didn't think I was gonna make it.
During closing arguments, prosecutors said it was the defendant's own words during his police interview which show his guilt.
He says, my dumb wasn't there. And then Detective Butcher says, what's going to happen, Ramon, when your DNA comes back inside that vehicle? And he responds, and again, these are his words, not mine. I'm He says, whether I was in that car or not, whether you're going to find DNA, I don't think you will. But then he says, if you're dumb enough to get caught, you're dumb enough to take the blame. Now it's really dawning on him. He's desperate, he says. But as far as guilty, innocent, or anything like that, my dumb is caught. This is particularly chilling. 5129, when asked if he used any other names besides his nickname, he then, quote, says, why? What did you hear? And he smiles a big smile. He knows what this case is about. He completely changes his demeanor when asked about the nickname to that. Again, he's pretty smart. He says, I know a lot. And she said, likewise, Detective Butcher. And he responds, I know you do, but I don't mean to be this way, but it's my life. And if it's already over, it's my life. His life isn't over because he's lying or helping Danny or someone else. His life is over because he got caught.
The defense said throughout this trial that the evidence does not put a gun directly in the defendant's hands, but prosecutors asked jurors to look at video from a train shortly after the shooting for evidence that Ramon Bueno is in fact the shooter.
At 3:08:09, you're going to see the shadows of the men that Larry Martinez described to you. The defendant and Danny cross over in front. And remember this, the demeanor of how we described them, laughing and joking. Larry told you that the guy wearing the white shirt was bleeding from the lower left back. He had no idea when he was interviewed that someone had been shot because remember, that was not broadcast over the news. And at 3:09:23, you're going to see the silhouette of a gun in the defendant's hand. The defendant did absolutely everything he could to get away with the attempted murder of Trooper Casey and the shooting of all 3 officers. As Casey started to die and choked to death on the pavement, Trooper Cruz worked to save Casey's life. Trooper Cruz, professionally and literally under fire, took control of the situation, saving his life and getting information out to first responders for the first 7 minutes.
The defense said the officers on the scene don't remember everything and that the lead detective's reliance on the driver of the vehicle from which the shots were fired was misplaced because the driver's story changed.
She testified that Lori Richardson didn't waver that Ramon Bueno was seated behind her. She saved that for trial. She took an oath, she looked all of you in the eyes when she testified, and she put Danny Vargas behind her. You saw it, you heard it. That's one of Lori Richardson's many missteps that I'll address in a minute, but she saved it for you. Her testimony was pretty basic. There wasn't a whole lot she could goof up, but she did. And remember, when Detective Butcher was on the witness stand, I said, can't the man who said, I hate cops, do this? Yeah, he could. Doesn't just have to be still, and if he does this, a trooper leaning against the outside of the car won't feel it. I didn't ask her if he could have lunged over and kicked on the door and dove over. I just said, couldn't he have done this? He's a big guy. Car's not that big. Or this. He's seated. Yeah, that's all possible. Again, there's no evidence in front of you about the trajectory of that bullet that struck Trooper Casey in the face.
The defense says Ramon Bueno was sitting in the back seat, but the defense says that doesn't again put a gun in his hand. The defense is pointing the finger at co-defendant Danny Vargas. In an incriminating statement, Vargas said to Trooper Casey.
Danny Vargas not only gave him a false name and acted as though he were sleeping, he told him, I hate cops. Trooper Casey said he kind of countered that by saying, I hate cops too, but that wasn't a funny exchange. Trooper Casey was probably trying to be disarming and just settle things down, but Danny Vargas wasn't. I hate cops. He's the one in the backseat passenger side who had his arms stretched out. I think that's how, relying on your collective memories, how Trooper Casey described it from the witness stand, and that's not suspicious. It should be. That's more suspicious than losing sight of someone's hand. And a juror question, one of 60 or 70 from all of you popped up. It was something like this. If you were not looking up, how do you know Ramon's the shooter? It's his instinct, it's his gut, it's what he thinks, it's what he hopes, it's what he believes. It's not what he saw. It can't be quantified, it can't be measured, it can't be examined. You find that the evidence has fallen short and is not proven guilty. What do? That's easy. Not guilty verdicts across the board. Remember the foreboding words of Danny Vargas and his behavior in the car. I hate cops.
Prosecutors immediately fired back, trying to shoot down the defense's theory that Bueno didn't have the gun.
The defense wants to pick apart each piece of the puzzle and say, look over here, it doesn't make sense, but when you put them all together, you have a very clear picture of what the defendant did. All of the evidence points squarely at the defendant. Now the defense wants to point the finger at Danny Vargas because he said, quote, I hate cops. Well, let me share with you something they say back in North Dakota. Birds of a feather flock together, there are no swans in the sewer. It is not a surprise that another Mexican mafia member has a similar outlook on life as a defendant. If Danny was the shooter, why was the defendant so concerned about Valeria snitching in his words? The defense can't decide if they like Lori Richardson or not. She's now testifying 5 years later, and you know memories fade. That is why law enforcement officers, they record their interviews, they write things down in reports, and you know that every single interview was recorded. They want her to be a liar and they want her to be telling the truth. But one thing she has said consistently, maybe not getting the names right, is it was the man seated behind her. And now we know that it was the defendant, Ramon Bueno.
Still ahead tonight here on The Debrief, our 4 guests and I break down those closing arguments you just watched some of, plus the key testimony in this case from Trooper James Casey, the victim who survived that shooting. We're back in just a moment. Let's go back now to the trial of Ramon Bueno, who stands accused of shooting Arizona Trooper James Casey in the face. Trooper Casey survived and took the stand. It was unclear, however, from his early testimony exactly where he was looking when he was shot or precisely who shot him. The trooper tried to clear that up on the witness stand.
He's sitting at the defense table. He's got a white shirt, a gray tie, and he's wearing glasses. The driver, she had her hands on the steering wheel, so her hands are accounted for. The front seat passenger, Vanessa Martinez, has her hands on both her legs like this. Both her hands are accounted for. Mr. Bueno has his left hand on his left leg. He has his right hand under a blanket. Valeria Jaime has a blanket and she's wrapped up like this. I see both of the tops of her hands and her knuckles. Danny Vargas is laying on the window like this. Both of his hands are accounted for. As I've stated many a times after this, I got so focused on identifying that man over there and losing track of his right hand almost cost me my life. So I'm 100% sure he shot me.
Trooper Casey originally identified another man, though, as the shooter, the man who was sitting next to defendant Bueno in the back seat. That man's named Danny Vargas. He pleaded guilty to gang charges and is serving a 15-year sentence. The defense reminded the jury that Trooper Casey's 100% certainty at trial that you just heard was not 100% certainty earlier on.
This gentleman in position number 1 is actually the second person you focused on in the line, correct?
I don't recall which order I focused on people, but he was the one I chose.
Do you remember initially pointing to the person in position number 6 before you went to the person in position number 1? You didn't sign it, but you went there and then you went to the person in position number 1?
I don't recall, but I would tell you if I did, it was because if you look at his goatee, it's not that full, firm one that number 2 does. So that's what I was focusing on, and he didn't have as a full of face.
So before the gunshot, you saw no movement in the car, correct?
You're talking about this is my second approach, correct? Yeah. No, not at that time, no, I did not.
So no movement prior to being shot. At that point in time, when you've got your notepad in your hand.
Yes.
Correct?
That's correct.
You didn't observe a muzzle blast.
No, I did not.
And you did not see a firearm.
I heard one, but I did not see one. No, I didn't hear a muzzle blast, but I heard a shot, yes. But I did not see a gun. No, I did not.
Let's take a further step back now to those frantic moments after the shooting itself. The suspect vehicle fled and got stuck near railroad tracks at 3 o'clock in the morning. A locomotive engineer describes seeing the car go by and then men appearing.
As I was watching the crew members, I saw headlights come around the corner of a building and started driving erratically down the access road. Saw a gentleman running, and I didn't know if he was running from the car, away from it as it sped by. I watched the car go by, and then I looked back, and there were 2 gentlemen kind of crouched down in the bushes, grass, whatever. And then after the car went by, they stood up and started walking towards the locomotive and crossed in front of it and kept on walking on the south side of the tracks all the way to 27th Avenue. They were both Hispanic males. Both were wearing dark pants. One had on a gray t-shirt. The other one had on a white, I called it a wife beater tank top. As they walked by, I noticed that he had a red spot, which appeared to be blood on the back of the t-shirt. They seemed acting like jovial, happy, kind of laughing, talking as they were walking by. I did say that I saw one of them, I couldn't remember which one, had a small bag of some kind.
And you heard how the prosecution tried to connect the dots with that earlier in the first half of the broadcast. So Dina, Dahl, Michael, Bryant are back now to discuss this case, break it down a little bit further. Michael, is this basically the state getting up there and saying, by process of elimination, we know that Ramon Bueno is the one who pulled the trigger here? And is process of elimination proof beyond a reasonable doubt that he's actually the trigger man?
That is the tough one. It really is. You have to assume, along with the trooper, that by process of elimination, it had to be Mr. Bueno. I don't know that that's enough. You have to take in the evidence from all the other sources to get past that assumption.
Dina, Dahl, so is it Vargas? Is it Bueno? Do we know? Does the jury know? The jury's got the case right now. Is the jury just basically trying to decide what we're trying to figure out here?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is tough. We know both Vargas and Bueno were in the car. There's DNA putting them in the car. It's just a matter of exactly who did the shooting. The jury's heard from forensic witnesses, from Officer Casey. This is going to be tough. I think there is doubt. Whether or not it rises to the level of reasonable doubt or not, too soon to tell.
You know, Michael, Bryant, what did you make of the advocacy in this case?
You know, I liked it in general. I think in the closings, the prosecution may have reached a little bit too far with that video suggesting you can actually see a hand in Ramon Bueno's, a gun in his hand. I think that was probably a bit much, but I appreciate the zeal for the position there.
Zealous advocacy. Okay, let's turn to the panel here in studio with me. Julie Rendelman, advocacy here. I thought the defense work was great. I thought the prosecution was pretty solid.
I thought they both did a great job. They were dealing with the hand they were given. And at the end of the day, when we talk about whether or not there's reasonable doubt, you have the main witness who identified someone else. I'm not really sure, at least I can't get past that, especially that, you know, that's the main witness who's now identifying someone different. So I think there's built-in reasonable doubt.
And the main witness basically getting up on the stand, Adam Konda, and saying, hey, look, you know, now I know it's him. Does the jury believe it? Thanks a lot to both of you. Thanks a lot for those of you watching along with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 o'clock for our recap of the day in court.